Welcome back, guys. Got an episode here from, what is this? Michael Bordinaro. It's not just you. No one wants kids anymore. So let's get into it.
Situation where the entire world is saying no to having kids. At first glance, I thought it was just a problem with the US, but this is actually something that's happening worldwide. And I want to get into some of the reasons why this is happening, because obviously this is going to have some long-term implications on the future health of our economy and how life will be for human beings, in 100 or 200 years from now. So here's the deal. The U.S. fertility rate just hit an all-time low of 1.62 births per woman, which is the lowest that we've seen since the 1930s.
Also, only 13% of those births were from actual Americans. The rest were from immigrants. Just keep that in mind as well.
In the 1950s, the number was about 3.7. And in order for us to maintain a stable population, we need to have at least 2.1 births per woman. And like I said, this is a problem everywhere, especially in the more developed countries. This is happening in Japan. Japan has a much worse population crisis than we have here, where you have about 30% of the adults there age 65 or older. This is happening in Italy, in Germany. South Korea is in big trouble. They have a fertility rate of 0.72, which is less than half of what's needed to stabilize the population into the...
Yeah, and I have a theory. It's corporatocracy that we're all living under in these developed nations. It's not feminism that people are saying here in the West, because that doesn't exist in some of those other countries, especially China. The government there actually deemed it a threat to society and has censored, the CCP has censored feminist ideas. So, and then Eastern cultures are just completely different from Western cultures. And not only that, but even some African nations and some other countries in Latin America are experiencing the same stuff, especially in pockets where development is very high that reaches almost Western standards, whatever. So there's something about, and I believe the common thread in all of this is an economic underpinning, where I guess you could call us the new age serf class, is being priced out of family planning. We can't afford homes. We can't afford to have one parent stay at home and watch the kids. Everything has gotten too expensive. Wages have stagnated. Inflation has increased dramatically, especially in recent years. But what's happening is, over the last 60 years, if you've lived, say, somewhere developed like America, you're seeing that what you're earning with $1 and what you're able to buy with $1 is so much less than what the generations previous were able to afford. So your purchasing power as an American has gone dramatically in relative terms to what you could buy with previous generations. College costs, all that stuff. I mean, we know what the problems are, especially in the West. But in all these other nations, South Korea, and this is why I'm basing this theory that it's corporations that are causing this. Societies that value profits over people or profits over family. That's short-term thinking that destroys the society at large. Corporations have become almost like leeches, in that they depend on us to consume and buy their products, but are slowly killing us to the point where we're being squeezed out of every dollar and forced into lives that are not, I would say, ideal for the human condition to get us, the human animal, to reproduce. What happens when you put an animal in a cage, or you stress an animal out, or you put it in a highly stressful, unstable environment? They don't reproduce. No animal in nature reproduces under those conditions. We're the very same. It's like the kind of like the mouse utopia experiment brought on by corporations. We're forced to live in increasingly smaller boxes, closer together. Public transportation oftentimes is a headache. It's not even good, especially in some Western countries. Getting to and from work, stressful event, going and working in your cubicle, doing a job that's sucking the soul out of you, getting yelled at by a superior that doesn't care about you, working for a company that will replace you whenever it makes sense for the bottom line and their profits. So you don't have a real meaningful existence where you contribute to society as a whole, where you actually feel like you make a difference. So what do you think that does to the psychology of said animal? What do you think that does to its reproductive ability, capability? I mean, look at how sick we are because corporations want to maximize profit. They will put less than ideal quality ingredients or some weird preservative chemical they made up so it could stay on the shelf for 10 years so they don't have to make a new product. It never goes expired and money's not lost. But that is at the expense of your health. That's just one aspect. Pharmaceutical companies, you ever get sick, we don't want to treat you. We don't want to fully heal you. We just want you chronically coming in with this problem that will only be treated on a long-term basis, but not heal you. That's what I meant. They don't want to cure any problems. So these societies like South Korea, getting back to South Korea, basically, I think 2 or 3 corporations in South Korea basically are all of South Korea. They run everything, pretty much the government, everything. There's a crazy story I was reading. I don't know if it was Samsung or what company it was where the executive was caught in a bribery or some sort of scandal, corruption case. And basically the government appeased him. Once he contacted who he needed to contact, it put some pressure on the government. These 3 companies account for like almost all the employment in that entire country. These 3 companies account for all basically the high paying jobs where the students who are freshly graduate want to work at. That's the prestige job, to be working at something like a Samsung, for example. Because if you don't get a job at one of these prestigious companies or corporations or whatever, multinational corporations, conglomerates, you're seen as a failure in society. And they fund schools, they fund everything around you pretty much is paid by these corporations. They are a perfect merger with the state. And what happens when the state no longer looks at its citizens' needs, wants, and its rights, and instead only supplicates to corporations? Well, you have an environment where corporations thrive, but people suffer. And I think that's what we're experiencing on a global scale. The way we have societies functioning, whether you're under a communist nation like, say, China, or semi-communist, whatever you want to call it, whether you're in a democracy like we have here in the West, whether it comes in a form of socialism or it comes in a form of like capitalist corporate welfare, right? Socialized losses, privatized gains. We can bail out a giant corporation because they're too big to fail, but we can't bail out the small guy because you're small and insignificant. But they don't know that thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of these small and insignificant people that need to be bailed out and helped are the backbone of what makes our country great, what makes every country great. It's our farmers. It's the people at the counter in the pharmacy. It's the guys putting up a roof, digging ditches, laying down power lines, right? It's the people doing the everyday hardworking jobs that keep society functioning, but we can't bail out normal, everyday, hardworking people. Only if you're a bank, you fuck up, you steal people's millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, billions, and no CEO gets arrested. They'll get a fall guy if there even is one. They'll pay a fine, and that's essentially the price of doing business, guys. This is the countries that we live in. This is the society that we live in. It doesn't serve you or me. It only serves the powerful and the elite. Don't believe me? Just look at the last 20 years and what laws benefit what? Corporations or people? Your rights are being eroded every day. And corporations are gaining increasingly more and more power to operate within multiple countries. I don't know. Just me spilling some beans on what I think. I think the corporatism, if somebody has another name for a corporate oligarchy or whatever it is, that comes in many names. Corporate social welfare state. You can call it what you want, but I don't think that's a country that puts family planning, family values, and procreation first. And so it's only the natural order of business that it dies out eventually. You can open up your borders all you want and import millions of people, but the system is the same. So then their children also don't have kids in the same system, right? There's a common variable here that affects everybody, no matter what. If you're a first generation immigrant or you've been here for 6, 7, 8 generations, we all end up in the same place. No homes, no kids.
The future. And before you think I'm going to get all Elon Musk on you and tell everybody that you should be having kids, I'm not going to be doing that because people have the right to choose what they want to do in their own life. Nobody should be telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing with it. And if we have fewer people in the world in the future and it collapses our economy as we know it, so be it. Because the world went on just fine before there was all these people here. It'll go on just fine without so many in the future. So many people get worried about the financial aspect of this. Who's going to pay for everything? Who's going to deal with all this debt and all of that? Well, maybe there'd be just such few people that just say, you know what, let's cancel all the debt. But I want to dive into some of the reasons that people are deciding not to have kids because I find this very fascinating, especially as also somebody who doesn't have any kids. Because in a recent U.S. study, they asked people ages 18 to 49 why they didn't want kids. Okay, and 56% said they just didn't want them. Other reasons they cited were things like financial concerns, lack of a partner, or even things like climate change. And a lot of this can be very valid, especially with how expensive it is to live today. Most people have a hard time just taking care of themselves or a couple having a hard time living on their own, paying all the bills, affording everything, bringing more mouths to feed into the picture and constraining your time and energy and resources even further doesn't sound like a very appealing prospect for a lot of people. When it comes to financials, you're going to have the high costs of raising children. That includes things like education, childcare, healthcare. Some people cite lack of a partner, right? But also, even if you have a partner, you need to have stability with that partner. Some people might hesitate to have a child with somebody if they're unsure about the stability of their current relationship. Or sometimes you're just not with the right person that seem like a good person to have kids with. There's also things that people value, like their personal freedom. Some people love to have their independence. They want to have the freedom to travel. They want to pursue hobbies, and make spontaneous life choices without commitments that come with parenting. And this is becoming an increasingly popular lifestyle that people are choosing to live. But interestingly enough, 15% of people mention that it's difficult to find a partner, and it's supposed to be easier than ever with all of the dating apps out there that you're supposed to be able to just turn this thing on and you have a date tomorrow night without putting in any effort. But from what I've heard, and I've never used one of these dating apps before ever, but from what I've heard from a lot of people and things I've seen here on YouTube, even though it might be easier than ever to meet people on these dating apps, it's a lot harder to establish a real connection with someone. When you are looking for a partner this way, it makes it look like, first of all, that your options are unlimited, which is not true. But a lot of people start believing that it is due to the seemingly high volume of matches they might get or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And because of that, the grass is always greener mentality with a lot of people on these dating apps. You could find someone and meet someone and even have a successful date or even successful 2 dates and then never hear from that person again because somehow they might think that they can find somebody better. They feel like their options are still plentiful, which that's something I'll never understand because as a person, for me, it's all about connection, if I feel a connection with somebody, then it doesn't really make you want to keep, seeing all the other options out there, especially in the beginning, when you first start dating, that connection is like rock solid and all you can think about is the other person, But according to Pew Research, 75% of people found it difficult to find someone compatible to have children with. So that's pretty bad, I don't know exactly what everyone's looking for in partners to have children, but I would imagine it's quite a long list, right? It's already hard enough to get into a successful relationship, but it's even harder to find somebody you're willing to have children with because there's a lot of long-term consequences that come along with that. But obviously, one of the biggest drawbacks to having kids, let's face it, especially in today's world, guys, is the cost, okay? They say that raising a child on average costs about $300,000 until they get to the age of 17, and that's just as of the 2022 figures. And we know that the cost of everything has risen substantially since then. We're already in 2025, so you can reasonably say it costs even more than that now. And if you're going to be paying for their college, you might as well round it up to $400,000 a kid, or maybe even beyond that, accounting for additional inflation. And most young adults who are in their prime years for having kids are already dealing with a lot of financial troubles of their own. Look at the credit card debt situation we talked about yesterday. Look at how many people are piled up with student loan debt in the 6 figures sometimes. And then you're just struggling to buy a house. You're supposed to think about having kids too. Wow, check it out. We have a house here that's actually not a flip. This house was purchased back in 1989 for only $100,000, okay? They listed it back
10X.
in September of 24 for $1.1 million.
This is what I'm talking about. 10X. Okay, 1989, fine. What was this guy making? My father came to the United States in 91, 92. He was working construction, an immigrant, hardly knew English. He was making around $45,000, $50,000 back then, a year. Back then, an immigrant can come. We went to Atlanta, Georgia in 94. They were hosting the Olympics, I believe. So a huge amount of construction was happening in the area. Lots of investment for the Olympics, of course. So money was pouring into Georgia at that time. And maybe we caught an upswing. So who knows if he was earning above what everybody was or around the same. in relative, close vicinities, say like Alabama, Florida, South North Carolina, Tennessee, stuff like that. Who knows? Maybe Georgia just had a huge upswing because of the Olympics or people moving there, whatever. Okay, so $50,000 back then. Only a few years later, the house, let's just say, was worth 110, 120. Guys, look at what you could afford back then. That's what's insane, man. We don't understand the purchasing power that we've lost, how much the currency has been debased. The dollar has lost so much of its value in comparison to assets like the houses, the stock market, gold, silver, all that stuff. Honestly, it's a tragedy, the mismanagement of America's wealth by the politicians. And people, everyday people, are the ones paying the price. This is what I told you guys. You're seeing it right here. Now, in 2024, that same house, and it's not like the house got expanded. It had multiple additions, something crazy, development around in the area with like ultra high-end luxury mansions and shit like this to prop the price up. And the guy was just, stubborn and didn't sell. Now the area pretty much looks the same. A few stores were added here and there, but it's probably in somewhere suburbia, like where he's walking. It just looks nice. You think that development merits a 10x increase, that the price is now over $1 million. And by the way, the price change that he's looking at already was reduced by 4.5%. Wow. So imagine that. No one wants to pay. No one can afford to even pay. Like, does that look like what you would think about growing up as $1 million house? Look at it.
And since they've cut the price about 50.
Come on, man. 1,627 square feet, 3 bed, 2 baths. Look at the interior. What the hell, dude? This is $1 million house with a price cut of $50,000. This is nuts, dude. This is unsustainable.
Grand, and it's still sitting here. For Miami Beach, that's actually not a bad price these days, which is kind of crazy to say. I think the price needs to come down even further because we're already talking 4 months on the market and no buyer. It's just amazing to see anything that's not a flip these days. So here's the other thing. When you're thinking about finances and becoming a parent and how much it's going to cost, obviously, $300,000 per kid, $400,000 is even probably more realistic. That's pretty hefty. But if you invested $400,000 in the stock market, for example, after 17 years, you could have roughly doubled that into about $810,000. That's more money than most people ever get saved for retirement. I went over this in a recent retirement video with you guys. Like the average person between 65 and 75 years old has $200,000 saved for retirement, guys. In 17 years of raising a kid, if you put all of that money into raising a kid into investments instead, you can already come out with $800K in 17 years. Imagine how much money that would be by the time you're actually ready to retire. So that could be a very enticing reason for a lot of people not to want to have kids. But one thing that you're also seeing is a lot of people are saying that they just don't want kids, which is an overall cultural shift that we're seeing that we didn't have before. In 2003, 83% of people said they wanted kids. And fast forward to today, that's dropped down to 51%. A lot of young people are very skeptical about bringing a kid into this world with the uncertainty about the jobs and the economy, looking at their own situation that they're facing and wondering if that's going to be a good future for themselves or their children, which kind of leads into a few other reasons why people are deciding not to have kids. People want to have that personal freedom, right? And not have to have that burden of worrying about what's going to be the future for my kid or what's the economy going to be like in 20 years when they start working and all of that. If you don't have any kids, you don't have to worry about it. Also, a lot of people are looking at their career. They're just now entering the job market, and many people are prioritizing their careers. And they know that if you have a child, it can greatly interfere with your professional goals or aspirations. This is especially true for women, right? Because obviously women have to carry the kid to term. And then once the baby is born, oftentimes it's the mother that gets maternity leave, not the father. And this can be a major setback for a woman's career. And it's like, why did you just spend 4 years or 6 years going to college only to 4 or 5 years later, pop out a couple of kids and be a stay-at-home mom? It made it all for nothing. You spend all this money. You have a bunch of student loan debt. So it's almost like a decision you have to make as a young woman before you even go to college if you want to have kids, because it might play into your future and the decisions you make now. A lot of people are also wanting to just have more work-life balance. There's already a challenge, effectively balancing work-life balance between just yourself and maybe your partner, right? But if you have children and throw them into the mix, then that creates a whole new set of responsibilities and a whole nother person you have to dedicate time to, which takes away time from the relationship, which can have devastating consequences down the road as well.
The problem is you have to work like a dog to support the lifestyle that you should have had on one income alone. Now your wife has to work too, so you got to balance work, life, family, which is damn near impossible today, like I said, with the economic talk we had earlier. So what is a man to do? What is a woman to do? I don't know. A woman's got to hope she gets a man that makes some decent money, because otherwise she's going to have to put her degree to use, go to work for a company she's going to hate. And when she does decide to have kids, if she is lucky enough to have kids and find somebody, then she'll spend probably half of her income on childcare, on just daycare alone. So you're going to work to have your income cut in half or more, just so somebody else could watch your kid. What? That sounds insane. And then you, the father, are going to work putting in extra hours, begging for overtime, trying to angle for that promotion, doing everything you can to be competitive at work while trying to balance a family life and being present, being a present father. But also you need to provide. So like dad's never home because he's constantly working because we have to have a roof over our head and food. And ends aren't being met. And this is like the everyday conundrum that middle-class America is like struggling with. How the fuck are we going to get ahead? How are we going to make it when a kid could set you back financially so much in the societies that we've built today? It's insane, dude. Back then we used to have 10, 15 kids basically because they would be the hand on the farm that would help you. You're tilling the land, you're farming, you're selling your crops. Every season, you need more and more hands to work. Sometimes we lost a kid here and there, stillborns and all that stuff. The health complications, modern medicine hasn't arrived. So people had large families. They made sense economically. The economic output of the family unit was increasing. The economic output for having children does not increase anymore. They're now a burden in the West to have children. What economic benefits do you get from your children other than like your kid becomes, a famous NFL or NBA player, some sports or some shit like that, or becomes like a rich businessman, he starts his own company or strikes a rich developing an app or, something like that where they enjoy uber levels of success very early and then end up retiring you. Like that's the economic benefit. But how many people's kids are that talented and have that kind of, capacity within them? It's very rare, dude. So you're going to end up paying for this kid 18 years. Then you're going to end up paying for their college, which pretty much is costing the entire 18 years again in the span of 4 years, if you could even afford that shit. And they'll be graduating with a degree for most likely a job that got shipped overseas or that they'll bring in an immigrant to do for way less than what an American would. So I don't know, dude. System's fucked up. I don't have the answers how to fix it. I do have some answers, but my opinions don't mean jack shit. I'm not the president. And I'm not in the Senate or the Congress. Our votes really don't matter collectively. They do what they want for the people that paid for their campaigns. Red or blue, they don't care about you. And you just got to do what's in the best interest of you and your family. I could only care about the people in my immediate vicinity and try to help them and my friends that I consider brothers. That's it, man. That's all we can really do. Your tribe is all that matters because we have such a dysfunctional society. Nobody represents us. The people that vote for us or that we vote for don't represent us. We see it every day. How could you possibly vote for somebody that makes your quality of life worse? And by the way, it's not a Republican or Democrat thing. It's just a politician thing. You could vote for your team or that guy could vote for his team. It's irrelevant. Our life has collectively gotten worse in the last 50 years. Like objectively, you can say that, right? Everybody's life has gotten worse on average. Obviously, some people will be doing better at the other end of the band and some people are doing much worse at the other end of the band. But collectively, as a group overall, when you factor in inflation, purchasing power, wages, all that stuff, we're actually doing worse, no matter who you vote for. So, I don't know, food for thought. Try not to look at each other as enemies. That's what I tell people. Look up, look at the people who write the laws. They're responsible for all this, not your neighbor and who he voted for and who he got tricked into picking for the election or whatever. None of this shit matters, dude. That's all noise. Your skin color doesn't matter. That's all noise. Your ageism bullshit, whether you're old or young, doesn't matter. It's all noise. What side of the political spectrum you're on, it's all fucking noise, dude. At the end of the day, the person across from you is just trying to make it and feed his family just like you are. That's it. It's the people at the top who make these fucking rules, who shake hands behind closed doors, who take money from entities to do their bidding. That's the issue. So try not to fall for the trap, but that's asking for much today. This comment says, I don't blame the younger generation at all. They are struggling and the American dream is dead. The real question is, why would they want kids and continue all this hard living? The billionaires are freaking out because they want more wage slaves. I'm so tired of rich people telling people of lesser means to take on financial obligations. They don't understand how hard it is today. They never had to do without. Sheesh. I'm 31. My girlfriend's 29. Living in California, we are not having kids. We cannot afford to do so. Yeah. Anyways, links in the description below for this channel for the rest of this video. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Questions, concerns, type them all out. I'll be curious to read what everybody thinks as usual. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, everybody.